All right. So it's no secret I am a huge James Cameron fan. I think he's up there with like Hitchcock in terms of like the pantheon of brilliant filmmakers. But when he was making this movie, he wasn't the James Cameron yet. So what happened was very early on in his career, before he even made Terminator, he got hired by the producers David Giler and Walter Hill to write the sequel to Aliens. And basically, they came up with the story where they're like, we want Ripley to come back, and she teams up with some military types in space. And that was basically like what they gave him. And he's like, okay, I think I can turn that into something. And so while he's working on this script, he's also working on the script for Terminator, and he's working on the script for Rambo: First Blood Part 2. And so he's working on 3 scripts at once. And he turns in like a draft that's like 90% complete. And Walter Hill loves it. Like, he just thinks like this treatment is brilliant. And James Cameron's like, well, I have to go off and shoot this movie Terminator. So you might want to, basically get someone else to come in and finish the script. And Walter Hill's like, no, dude, you're so good. We're going to wait for you. So like after you finish Terminator, come back and work on our script. And he's like, okay. So he goes and he makes Terminator. And while this is going on, like the producers bring like the script to like to Fox, which is the studio, I believe. And the head of the guy who runs the studio, he liked the script so much where he's like, we're going to hold off going into production because I hear good things about this Cameron guy. And
this James Cameron kid, he's got something.
No joke. Yeah. And so like once Terminator became a huge hit, everyone was like, okay, we got James Cameron attached to this thing. This is going to be his next movie. Yeah. And so James Cameron comes on board with his wife / producing partner, Gail Ann Hurd, to do this thing. And, part of his script was that, Ripley comes back. But at the time, like there was like a big kind of stigma attached to sequels where they're like, they cost twice as much and make half as much. And so like nobody wanted to do like a sequel, especially Sigourney Weaver, because she was like, well, the first movie was so good, I don't want to tarnish it by coming back and doing a crappy sequel. And so like, James Cameron was like, I'm not going to do this movie without Sigourney Weaver. And so the studio was negotiating with her people, and Sigourney Weaver's people were like, we want more money, we want more money, we want more money. And so Cameron was like, okay. He calls up Schwarzenegger's agent, and he's just kind of talking to him, and he says like, yeah, man, like I'm ready to write Ripley out of the story and just go with like a completely different actress. And Schwarzenegger's agent mentions this at a lunch with Sigourney Weaver's agent, and immediately they call up the studio and they're like, yeah, we're ready to deal. and so Cameron like played Cameron played some mind games to get Sigourney Weaver back on the thing, on the movie. But what was really interesting about this film is that it was like one of the most difficult shoots for Cameron to do at the time, because they were shooting it at Pinewood Studios in London, England. And Pinewood was where they shot the original Aliens. And Pinewood is unique in the sense that normally like you'd hire your crew and then you'd go to a studio to shoot the movie. But with Pinewood, they have like unionized crews that like are with the studio. And so like when you shoot there, you shoot with like a pre-made crew that Pinewood gives you. And so Cameron came in, and nobody in Britain knew who the fuck he was. Like Terminator hadn't come out there yet. They didn't know who he was. And they had worked with Ridley Scott on the first Alien, and they're like, this guy's not Ridley Scott. And so Cameron had a first assistant director and a cinematographer who didn't like him. And they kind of resented working with him because they looked at him as kind of an upstart. And he ended up firing both guys and pissing off the rest of the crew because they're like, hey, those are our buddies. And the crew in England was so used to like a very lax work schedule. Like they'd be in the middle of shooting a scene, and then they'd take a tea break, and everyone would be like, what the hell, man? And so Cameron would like basically like when the crew was on break, he would do every job and keep shooting. And so like it was just this culture clash between him and this British crew, which was used to just kind of like doing things, in a very lackadaisical way.
It's tea time, man.
Yeah.
What do you mean tea time?
What about second breakfast?
It's tea time. We break for tea time.
And the crew also resented Gail Ann Hurd because they were like, she's banging the director. That's the only reason she has the job.
She was a bit of a ball buster, though.
Well, she was the only one who could tell James Cameron his ideas sucked.
It's like me and you.
Yeah, exactly. So she was the only one who could rein him in. And it was funny because Hicks, who's played by Michael Biehn in this movie, originally James Remar, Dexter's dad, was cast in the role.
Going to ask you if you were going to touch on that.
Yeah, and basically he was replaced like a week into shooting with Michael Biehn, and the reason for that was like Remar was like so into drugs at the time, and the only reason he got cast was because he had worked with Walter Hill on The Warriors, and so like he was like he was such a drug addict at the time that like he was just like flubbing his lines and stuff like that. But there's a scene where they're going into like the alien's nest, and every time you see Michael Bihn's character Hicks from behind, that's actually James Remar, because they didn't have the budget to reshoot that scene at the time, and so Michael Biehn kind of came in late to the game and took over the role.
Oh, that's cool. I like that trivia.
Totally have that Warriors
Yeah.
scene stuck in my head now.
I'm telling you, man, watch the movies that made us this episode. I love the Marines. I love them. They make this movie. I could give a shit about Ripley.
Oh, for sure.
I like the Marines. Hicks and Vasquez and all these guys.
I'm Team Ripley all the way on this movie.
Hey, Vasquez, you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
You know what's great about the Marines in this? So like, you know, this was a long shoot, and James Cameron saved all those scenes for the end of the movie or for the end of the shoot because he wanted the actors to get that camaraderie. So like when we wake up, we feel like this is a squad that's been together for a long time, and the time that they spent shooting the movie together up to that point really comes across, and that's one of the reasons why James Cameron is such a brilliant director. Is like little things like that. But we got to talk about Bill Paxton.
Game over, man.
Game over, man.
Put her in charge.
I love how panicky he gets as soon as shit goes down. He's like, "We're not ready for this, man. We're not gonna make it, bro."
Well, it's funny because when Paxton heard that Cameron was making this movie, you know, they were friends, and he was like, "Man, you better write me a good part in that movie." and Cameron was like, "Oh, you want to be in it? Okay, I'll write your part." And so like he wrote the part of, was it Hudson?
Yeah.
Shit, I can't remember his name.
Hudson. And basically on set, Bill Paxton ad-libbed all of his lines.
Really?
No way.
So like the game over man thing, the you know, drop your linens, and you know,
Oh my God.
whatever it is. Like he came up with all that stuff, and
Well, that was the sergeant. But yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, pretty much everything that Bill Paxton says in this movie came from him.
All right.
I told you I didn't need to watch this.
Bill Paxton is a freaking... I miss him, man.
Yeah,
I really do.
It's really. I actually got to meet him a few times.
No way.
He's dead?
Man. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he passed away a while ago.
Well, 5 or 6 years ago now.
Really?
Probably.
Yeah.
It was not expected either. It was sudden.
Yeah.
But around the time he was on Big Love, I ran into him at a few film festivals a couple times. He was just the coolest. He was the coolest guy, man.
Seems like it. I love him in Twister. That movie.
Yeah, Twister's fun.
He makes that movie. Like that movie could have been bad, but Bill Paxton's in it. It's great.
We haven't watched that for the show yet.
What was his character in Weird Science?
Oh,
was it Chet?
Chet, yeah.